here to discuss the upcoming election with our MP Francis Scarpaleggia of the Lac St. Louis riding. How are you doing today?
Very well. Welcome to our campaign office here on St. John Boulevard.
And we have taken measures, both fully vaccinated, and we are respecting COVID measures by keeping 2 meters apart, just the same.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's delve right in.
Yeah.
Canada ranks poorly in the number of people vaccinated in the G7 countries particularly. We're at the bottom of the list with 74% of us one vaccination and 67% of us are double dosed. Rumor has it they will need to have boosters every 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me about that?
Well, we're as I understand it, we're number one in the G20 for total vaccines administered per capita.
Okay.
You're correct. The numbers I have are 73% first dose, a minimum first dose, and 66% fully vaccinated. In terms of boosters, I think the researchers, the scientists are still looking at how and when that might be necessary, or if it might just be necessary for vulnerable populations who have a medical condition. So that's where we stand. I think it's very important that we get those numbers up. Originally, the talk was that we needed maybe, 75-80% to be vaccinated to get sort of a herd immunity, but then the variant came along, and my understanding is that the goal is 90% now. So it's very important that people be vaccinated, and there are various incentives that are being put in place by the provincial and federal governments to encourage people to be vaccinated.
And how do you feel about the vaccine passport? Some of our followers feel a heavy presence of the government already in their lives. Some feel that this will jeopardize their freedom. Many feel it is an overstep on the part of the government, even though they are not vaccinated. I understand it's a Quebec jurisdiction, but
well,
how do you feel?
Quebec, and it's not. I mean, yes, there's a provincial angle. So when it comes to which public spaces you can go in, if you're fully vaccinated, that's a provincial government decision. But the federal government, of course, makes rules for international travel, and also the Prime Minister has announced that federal employees, it will be mandatory for federal employees to be vaccinated, and employees in federally regulated industries. So this will hopefully boost the number of people vaccinated. But in terms of freedom and rights, we're protected in Canada by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and any measure, any legislation or policy that the federal government implements goes through what's called a charter analysis, especially when it comes to legislation. But the government is very aware of charter concerns, charter issues, and it only implements measures that are charter consistent. So, having to be vaccinated to go to the office if you're a federal employee, that, as far as I'm concerned, meets the demands of the charter. And so here in Quebec, for example, there is a vaccine passport, but you don't need it for essential services because that might infringe on the charter. So charter considerations, I think, play a big role in any policy or legislation or measures that the government implements.
Okay, sounds good. Housing. We're talking about affordable housing. I mean, I know this from my perspective as well as many of our followers. Affordable housing for Canadians is a great concern for families in our community. You have kids, I have kids. Many wonder what the next generation will be able to afford their first home. How will they buy in?
Well, the government's taken a number of steps to curb housing inflation, if you want to call it that. But in this campaign, we've made some additional commitments. So there will be a 2-year ban on the purchase of Canadian houses by non-Canadians. So that's one measure that is intended to dampen housing inflation a little bit. But also we're creating mechanisms to help first-time home buyers. We already brought in the first-time home buyers incentive, where somebody can get an equity investment from the government in their house, which they don't have to pay back until they sell their house. So we're going to make that program more flexible. Some people may say, well, I expect my house to really rise in value. When I sell it, I don't want the government to get a higher, to benefit from this capital gain through their equity investment. I'd rather take a loan today. So we're going to say to them, look, you can take a loan which you won't have to pay interest on until you sell your house. So this program now will be more flexible. We're also going to create a new first-time home buyers savings plan, if you want to call it that. It's going to be a combination of the RRSP and the TFSA. So when you put money in this fund, you get to deduct what you put in on your taxes, and the growth that you experience in this fund, like in the TFSA, will not be taxed. So this is another vehicle that we're creating to help first-time home buyers afford the price of their own home.
What about the rent towards that? There was something in the news about the rent.
Well, the slogan, if you will, is from renter to owner. That's
right.
So these programs are intended to move people from being renters to homeowners.
Okay. So we're looking at trying to help these kids get started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, we're going to temporarily ban foreign purchases of Canadian homes.
For how long?
For 2 years. For we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens after 2 years. But the commitment is for 2 years.
Can you explain the feeling behind that? What's the end game?
A lot of some studies, for example, in BC, have shown that foreign capital coming in to purchase homes has been driving up the price of homes, and also we imposed a tax a few years back on vacant homes for non-resident, non-Canadian owners. So there are a lot of vacant homes in the market that people are waiting to flip, perhaps. So we're also going to bring in measures to stop flipping of homes. So we don't want people just to buy homes as as a sort of real estate investment, quick turnover real estate investment. We want them to buy homes and to be property owners and to live in them. And yes, of course, there'll be a capital appreciation, but the whole idea is to sort of dampen some of the forces that are driving up the price of housing.
The new program seems to indicate that if I own a home and if I make a profit on my home, I'm going to pay a tax on my primary dwelling. Is that a fact?
No. This is there's no intention whatsoever of taxing capital gains on principal residences. That was misinformation that was spread in the last election campaign. No, that's not what we're talking about.
Because that's terrifying. Because most people, their
of
their
course,
home is their retirement.
Absolutely, and so there's no. The Prime Minister has been very clear in public statements that this was a bit of misinformation that was being spread in the last election campaign for political gain. But no, that's not how it works in Canada.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
Maybe you could take it back to the boss.
Mm-hmm.
What about when parents help their kids get a deposit so we get the rebate? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. It sounds quite complicated, but it's something to think about, I guess. But the idea is to help first-time home buyers, and we're going to double also the first-time home buyers tax credit, which is it's a $5,000 tax credit. It's worth about $750. So we're going to double that.
Okay, we're moving on to the debt question. Our children's futures have been mortgaged for the sake of the pandemic. You both have children. Both of us have children. How will this impact them? How will your government handle this moving forward? I guess this follower wants to know.
Yeah, there's two things here. There's the deficit and the debt, of course. The problem with deficits is when they're structural, meaning you have a deficit that's never going to end. So the deficit we've had in the last year or year and a half is a temporary deficit that was used to finance temporary programs to get us through the pandemic. They've already been sunsetted, most of these programs. So the Parliamentary Budget Officer, who is independent of the government, doesn't report to the government, is not partisan, has basically said we're going to balance the budget in about 4 years. In terms of the debt, the interesting thing about the debt is that according to international economists, if we had not taken the steps we took with the programs that we introduced, the debt to GDP ratio would be as high today, but our economy would be down in terms of greater unemployment and less production. So we'd have the same debt to GDP ratio, but a weaker economy. And now we have a stronger economy that's poised for recovery. And the important thing about the debt is to keep it going down as a percentage of GDP. And that's what the projection is, especially with deficits that will be shrinking rather quickly in the next 4 years.
Okay. I'm going to move on to another question from another follower. We are living through an unprecedented information crisis at the moment in time when we need high quality factual news more than ever. COVID-19 has deepened the damage to our already fragile media sector. I have to agree with this. Meanwhile, foreign tech giants like Facebook that profit from misinformation are only capturing more of our attention, time, and money. How will you defend Canadian journalism, moving, and storytelling?
Yeah, well, we've been working on legislation in this area, which is based a little bit on the Australian model. So that one of the big problems that traditional news media have is that, well, their markets are shrinking, of course, but they put a lot of money into doing the analysis and the research that, as you mentioned, is so fundamental to getting the truth and having a healthy democracy based on, that is basing itself on well-researched facts. The problem is you get a newspaper, for example, that puts all these resources into writing a good, a good piece, and then somebody shares it on Facebook, and Facebook's not paying for that. So
doesn't move.
In Australia, they've developed a model where the web giants, or whatever you want to call them, will have to compensate the traditional media for sharing their content, and we're moving in that direction as well. The Minister of Canadian Heritage has been developing legislation, which I hope we'll be introducing shortly if we're re-elected. So it's very important that traditional news media, whether it be print or, well, print basically, because you're sharing stories that are usually on their websites, that they be compensated for that content so that they can hire the journalists and the researchers to continue producing first-rate content.
That's necessary, I agree. Yeah. Okay, one last question for you, and then we'll move on to our other candidate. How will voting physically take place? Should we shut down? Do we expect to have, is there a measure in place that we can make sure that people can get out to vote?
Well, you can vote by mail if you register with...
If you have to be 70 and older?
No.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, not to my knowledge, no. I think you can vote by mail just by going to the website and clicking that you'd like to vote.
Mixing up municipal elections.
Yeah, yes, I think,
yes,
yeah, that's right.
I am.
No, you don't have to be a certain age, so you can vote by mail. I think you have to register fairly quickly for that. But Elections Canada has protocols in place. They've said well in advance of this election that they can hold an election in a pandemic situation. And Theresa Tam, the public health officer, has said, we can go ahead with an election if we take the proper precautions, which is what Elections Canada is doing. So I don't see any problem in that regard.
There won't be any passport requirements for this, I'm sure, because
that's an essential service, really.
An essential service.
No,
pretty much is.
But it'll be taken care of. I think I heard that, which is what many establishments are doing now. You come in, you put on their mask.
Like a hospital.
Yeah, and then like a hospital, and of course you'll go in one door, out the other, and and the flow will be carefully controlled. I'm not concerned, but some people might have concerns because they have medical conditions or what have you. They can vote by mail. Okay,
so that you've heard it here. You need to register in order to vote by mail. Get that done. Head on over to the Canadian website, and you'll get that all taken care of. Thanks for taking your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Do you have anything else you want to say to my followers?
Well, I think it's wonderful that they're remaining engaged in the process, and because a vote is an important thing, and an informed vote is a really important thing.
I agree. I'm Rhonda Masad for West Island News. Thank you.